are so many things going on in the world right now, and what it is showing to us is that things are coming together that have been brewing for centuries, and particularly in the last 6 decades. But even centuries ago, the movement of things that were started by philosophers, way of thinking by people like Rene Descartes and Georg Hegel, Soren Kierkegaard, talking about relativism and what we know happened in the 1880s with people like Charles Darwin and Friedrich Nietzsche and Karl Marx in the 60s and in the 1860s that were important contributors to what was happening in the early 20th century, not only in the world but also here in America, that led to communism and Marxism and socialism. But then in the 60s, we saw the student revolution, which was basically the 1960s was the greatest rejection of a culture's values that has ever come about on the planet. And the 60s from there developed into incorporating some of these ideas of relativism and individualism and even of socialism that had started centuries ago. The disjunction of science and faith, which was never disjoined, which is not different kinds of knowledge, but that's the way it's been portrayed and that's the way it's been believed. But in the past 6 decades, the way this has all come together, and we all know about this because we've seen it happen. We see what happens when all of these relativisms and a relative morality and a relative truth and a socialistic viewpoint, and where students are being trained in the universities for their various positions that they take. And now we've come to the point where I don't even need to elaborate on these things because they've been elaborated on so many times and you all know about them. The cancel culture, where we preach tolerance, but we don't tolerate anybody but ourselves, and we will just delete you and cancel you and shut you down if you don't agree with us. Viewpoint discrimination. In the name of non-discrimination, we see a lot of viewpoint discrimination and the silencing of free speech. And again, it's been building for decades. We see the intolerance movement, who says they preach tolerance. The idea that science proves that Christianity is wrong, which of course is not true at all. That science is the only path to knowledge, which of course is not true at all. Just ask any philosopher or any mathematician. We're seeing the New Age movement that started back in the 1880s also with Helen Blavatsky and her ideas about nature and science. We also saw in the 1880s Mary Baker Eddy with the science movement. And it all materialized into what we called modernism, and then we called it postmodernism, where there's the complete rejection of objectivity, except, of course, in the area of science and math, which have been thrown in our faces as if they are the only knowledge there is. Truth is relative, morality is relative. Everything has been secularized. We would call it the desacralization of society. Religious things, spiritual things, those don't matter anymore except as personal preference or personal opinion, but they have nothing to do with fact or truth or any of that matter. And so everything is secular now. We've seen in the last number of decades important movements towards globalism, that we're a global community and we need to act as a global community. And perhaps we need global governments, perhaps we need global agencies like the United Nations, like the World Health Organization and other such organizations. We have seen the rise of identity politics, where what matters is not objective truth, but what matters is what each individual group, all that matters is their past and their future, with no particular sense of any corporate obligation or community values, but it's all about me, it's all about my identity. We see that universities have become training grounds for secularization and certainly the undermining of Christianity, etc., etc., etc. You know about these things. These things have been in the news. They've been in the books that you've been reading. You've read about them in the papers. You've talked to about them, and we've seen this coming. So there's nothing new or surprising to any of you. That's why I'm not elaborating on all these things, because there are hundreds of YouTube videos and documents you can read about any one of them. I don't have to elaborate on them because we've been analyzing it and we've been talking about it for decades now. We've seen the havoc, the sheer havoc that postmodernism and relativity and secularism and media and liberal arts education have wreaked on our culture, what they have done to our families, what they've done to our students and to our children. And there's no need to elaborate or rehash all of that. What we need is some way to put it all together so that we have some kind of an understanding of what is happening and where our direction as Christians lie. So one of the things we've seen is that when you take truth out of the equation, everything is in flux. That would be my first point. When we take truth out of the equation, everything is in flux. If truth is relative, then really everything has lost its meaning, because you can just say, that's not the way I see it. I have my own truth. I have my own values based on my own truth. So I can do whatever I want. I can think whatever I want, because what I think is just as true as what anybody else thinks. And of course, we'd have to ask the question, well, how do you know that's true? But since there is no objective truth, there is no answer to that question. You know, we all know that the idea behind making truth my truth and your truth is just a way of saying, so that I can believe whatever I want to believe and be justified in it, and so that I can think whatever I want to think and be justified in it. You know, they claim they haven't taken truth out, but instead it said science is the only truth. Well, and if it isn't in science, then truth is all personal. So reality is based in social forces. That's what's real. Race, gender, economics, that's all that counts, and it's truth the way I want it to be. So we see everybody now as their categories. Oh, this is a whatever gender they would describe themselves as, and whatever race they would describe themselves as, because we're told that even race is just whatever you want it to be. It's a ridiculous mindset, and we get to oppress categories then that we deem to be immoral, which means that I get to be against whatever I don't believe in. And in the name of tolerance, I can be intolerant of someone else who doesn't see the categories the way I see categories. See, if we take truth out of the equation, everything is in flux, and society becomes chaotic, because thinking becomes chaotic, and definitions don't mean anything anymore. So if we take truth out of the picture, everybody gets to make up their own facts. Everybody gets to make up their own gender. Everybody gets to make up their own race. Everybody gets to make up their own truth. No wonder we're in such a mess. Look at the internet. There is so much false information flying around that we can hardly discern between truth and falseness anymore, because there is so much on the internet that are misinformation and distorted information and outright lies, and people seem to have no qualms about lying to us on the internet and spinning and distorting facts, distorting information, and even making up their own facts. And it's true also, as we know, of the professional journalists, and it's true also of the politicians, and it's true also of the scholars in the universities. We've become so advanced, we are nothing but a handful of dust. When you take the second point I want to make is when you take objectivity out of the equation, then all that is left is power. My first point was when you take truth out of the equation, all that is left is flux. But when you take objectivity out of the equation, all that is left is power. Truth, then, and culture belong to the most powerful. Now culture is in the hands of the loudest voice, and truth is in the hand of the strongest punch. And if you don't agree with us, we will burn your building down. If you don't agree with us, we will delete you off of social media so that your voice can never be heard. Culture is in the hand of whoever has the most money. Culture is in the hand of who perpetrates the most convincing lies. Just look at our politicians. Just a bunch of liars and skunks, and I know it has always been that way. In a sense, it's the nature of politics, and I know I'm generalizing. There may actually be some people in politics that have good character and noble personality and think straight, but it's hard to sort through, because when you take objectivity out of the equation, all that's left is power, and when you take truth out, all that's left is flux. Look at our universities, training camps of secularism, training camps of relativistic thinking, because they have the power, because they have our children, and because it's all over the country, then you can hardly escape it, even though there are ways of escape so that you may be able to bear it. Look at the shout-downs of opposing positions. If you come up to a microphone or get invited to speak somewhere and the people in the audience don't approve of free speech, and they don't approve of the idea that we should actually think about opposing viewpoints and give them consideration, you just get shouted down. You get deleted. We live in a cancel culture. Your voice doesn't get heard if you don't agree with what we say. Because all that's left is power when you take objectivity out of the equation. As I've already mentioned, cancel culture, and you know about that freedom and free speech are available only to those who agree with us. The third point I want to make is that when you take God out of the equation, all that is left is materiality and self. All you're left with is the material world and me. That's all you have left. Materialism is the idea that this world and the success it affords are the greatest pursuits in life. It's all that matters. So let's grab for the gusto. Let's get everything we can. Let's exercise as much power as we can. Let's perpetrate as much opinion under the name of truth that we can, using our power and using our voice to cancel other voices and to enhance ourselves, because this world and its success is the only pursuit in life. When you take God out of the equation, all that's left is materiality and self. In Marxism, and there's been a lot of talk lately about socialism, and I know there are vague distinctions between Marxism and socialism, but let's just talk about Marxism a little bit now, because it fits in with this whole attitude. It's part of what has come together here in these last number of years. In Marxism, it's the physical and the material are the fundamentals and the only realities of life, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. In Marxism, all ideas are molded by our material condition and our status, our economic status, our racial status, our educational status, and even in a sense, the way we perceive gender. See, these are, in a sense, Marxist ideas. They are secular, materialist perspectives. And in Marxism, since there is no God, the only just society is a material, egalitarian society where we all have the same amount of stuff. That's a socialist idea. It's also a communist idea. It's a Marxist idea. And therefore, under that mindset, under the mindset where truth is relative, where there is no objectivity, there is only power, there is only identity, there is only self and materiality, here's what that says to us, and we see it happening all around us. That what needs to go is anything related to the white culture. Let's take Shakespeare's picture off the wall. Let's knock down the statues of white people because whiteness is only a perpetuation. We are the perpetuators of the problem. And if you're white, you're racist. If you're white, you are supremacist. If you are white, you should be taken down. Something else that needs to go, Christianity. It claims to be true. Well, any philosophy or religion that claims to be true is obviously in the way, of our relativistic our relativistic subjective Marxist culture, our secular culture. Obviously, Christianity is in the way. If we're going to be material secularists, then Christianity has to go. What also has to go is a free market economy, because free market economy allows some people to advance over others. Basically, those who work and those who achieve get to advance over others. That's what free market economy is all about. To the creative and the successful belong success and the material benefits that come with that. So for a Marxist, for a secular materialist, Marxist, relativist, then a free market economy has to go because it allows people to advance. What also has to go is the success of those who work for it. Well, no, we've got to bring them down. We've got to bring them down so there's some kind of material egalitarian society where we can all be the same, so that the people who haven't worked at all can enjoy all the same benefits and all the same fortune as people who have worked for it. See, we need to destroy any kind of hierarchy and have just equality so that everybody who doesn't work gets to have the same benefits of those who do. What also has to go is trying to see everyone as equal. Well, see, we can't even go with egalitarian, materialist egalitarian, or equality. Instead, we need to give the underdogs a chance to have power. And so we need to give those who don't work more power than those who do. We need to give those who have been oppressed more status, not just equality, but more status than those who have oppressed them. See, that's where we take objectivity out of the equation. What else has to go is where we create opportunities for everyone. No, they want equality of results, not equality of opportunity. It's not like everybody has a fair chance to get this job. No, that's equality of opportunity. What they want is equality of results, which means that it's not the idea that we let everyone run in the race. That's equality of opportunity. But we let everybody be in first place. That's equality of results. We'll let everybody be in first place, and we'll let everybody get a prize or a medal at the end. Everybody gets a trophy because it's equality of results that matters. What else has to go? Full and free elections. Well, that's not fair because that's equality. What we need to do is give the oppressed a greater voice. What we need to do is give the underdog more votes than everybody else gets. They get more votes than you do because they've been oppressed for centuries. And so they get to have more power. When you take objectivity out of the equation, all that's left is power. Now, what else has to go is presumed innocence. If you're white, you're guilty. If you have money, you're guilty. Remember, there's no truth, and morality is relative. So the only truth in morality is the perspective of identity politics. And so the path to fairness, they would say, is that anybody who's been oppressed or anybody who's been an underdog, which means women, minority racial groups, and people who have less education and people who have lived in poverty. The path to fairness is give priority to those identity groups and to shut the middle and the upper class out, especially white people. And that's the only truth or morality that's left. You all understand, you see this in the news every day. That's what's going on. It's a conflagration. It's the great storm where all the elements are coming together that we've been looking at for 500 years are all coming together now in this great perfect storm. And once we remove truth and morality and logic from our way of thinking and acting, we are left with nothing but lies, evil, and wrong-headedness that are perceived as truth, goodness, and reason. That's where we are right now. You can see it in our culture every day. But the only way that works is if we keep changing the vocabulary and redefining what words mean. Now, this started way back in political correctness decades ago, but now we're seeing it come to real fruition and real head so that we can change the definition of any word we want and circulate that new definition and not only criticize, but delete or cancel anybody who doesn't agree with that definition. And that way we can perpetrate that definition across society so that only the people who agree with us get heard. So that's I know, a very brief and quick. I could talk for hours on what this is, but I want to really talk about, so where does our direction lie as Christians? Where do we go from here? I have 4 things to say. The first of all is that we have to refuse to be sucked in by this mindset and this worldview. It is all around us, and the pressure is very strong to conform to it, because if you don't conform to it, you will probably lose your job, you will probably lose your friends, and you may lose more than that if people come and destroy your house or your things. It's all around us. Their voices are loud because that's where the power is in, and they are both weakening us by the continual battering of culture. They are weakening us, and through the school systems, they are training our children to think that the way they do. Trust me when I say, but I don't think you'll have a problem believing this, it's a real spiritual battle. And we must fight against it with all our energy and all our training. Our second direction is that we must insist on truth. I would call it propositional truth. That truth is really true, that it's objective, and that there is such a thing. Reality and science depend on it, but science is not the only path to truth. And we must insist that propositional truth plays into every corner of life, including our faith and our values. As it must, if it is really authentic truth. This will be a total uphill battle. People will not believe us when we use words like truth in an objective sense, because the culture has been trained, thoroughly and systematically trained, to reject such a notion. And that idea has won. But we as Christians have to insist on propositional, objective truth. There is no reality without it. Number 3, We must fight the culture wars. They are working to dominate the vocabulary, and they are doing very well at it. They are working to dominate the airwaves. Now, there's a battle going on there, but since the social media companies are owned and run by the people who think in this way, they are canceling the voices of those who don't. Now, if we are passive, we are losing our friends and our family to lies. We are losing our friends and our family to these evils and to the nonsense. It's pure nonsense. We want life to be happy and easy. None of us want to engage the culture because the culture against us is a majority and they are very strong. But see, we want life to be happy and easy, but that ship sailed long, long ago. But if we don't want to lose our sanity, if we don't want to lose our friends, and we don't want to lose our children, then we have to know what we believe. We have to interact with each other and educate each other. As 1 Corinthians 14:26 says, let all things be done for the edification, for the building up of the church. And let us, in another text it says, and let us encourage one another as the night draws near. We have to interact with each other and educate each other about these things. And thirdly, we have to find legitimate, truthful authorities and follow the voices of reason and of goodness and truth, not the voices of our culture. The voices of our culture are heading in a different direction. They are misleading us, they are distorting, and a lot of times outright lying. The problem is that some of the other voices are outright lying also. We need to tell the truth. We need to find legitimate, truthful authorities. And that's a difficult task, but we have to. Okay, so then my fourth direction taps off of that. We have to inform each other and to be informed by each other. There's enough social media and private social media that we can be talking to each other, and we should be talking to each other. We need to knock down false arguments and confer with each other as to how to knock down those false arguments. We need to feed each other evidence. We need to reinforce the truth. We need to encourage and build each other up. You know, the secularists use the media to great advantage. We need to be as wise. We need to be as wise as foxes and as innocent as doves. I think Christians remained more isolated. We can't afford to do that anymore. When you see what's happening in the country, this is no time to remain isolated. We have to leave that behind and interact with each other more all the time. If we stand alone, we will fall.